Hey, good morning, Bob Burg. How are you, my friend?
Bill, it is always great to speak with you.
It's a pleasure, and I want to start off by thanking you for sharing some of your time with us, and more importantly, for sharing your wisdom and insights in just a few minutes.
My pleasure.
It's it's always great to hear from you.
Thank you. Likewise.
For those watching and listening to this, Bob has been a mentor, a teacher, and a friend of mine for very many years, and that is a blessing in my life. For those of you that don't have a full understanding of Mr. Burg, let me just give you a quick introduction so that you do understand a little bit more about this man. Bob Burg is a sought-after speaker at company leadership and sales conferences, sharing the platform with everyone from today's business leaders and broadcast personalities to even a former U.S. president. Bob is the author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, with total book sales of well over 1 million copies. His book, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, itself has sold over 950,000 copies, and it has been translated into 28 languages. His and John's newest parable in the Go-Giver series is the Go-Giver Influencer. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He is also an unapologetic animal fanatic and is a past member of the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption Clinic and Ranch in his town of Jupiter, Florida. 3 short paragraphs say an awful lot and paint a beautiful picture of you as a person, Bob. And again, thank you for sharing your time with us.
My absolute pleasure. Honor.
So, as we've talked a little bit, I am one of the original members of something formed here in St. Louis called the Relational Value Organization, and it is our vision and our commitment that our society and our business has moved. It started with financial value, which is I'll give you a service or a product and you give me money. It's then built on that with intellectual value, which is I know better, I know more, I can do things faster and more efficient and improve my services. And now I believe that what we believe is that we're getting a tremendous new awareness on what we call relational value, which very simply is something you've talked about for years, but it's harnessing the power of people in order to achieve a common goal and in order to let everyone achieve their goals. So the Relational Value Organization, the week of, what would that be, September 7th, is going to put on a virtual event called the RV Imprint. So if people want more information on that, they can go to rvimprint.com. You'll be able to, if you're there, you're watching this already. And there's plenty of other speakers. But let's focus on this man we have in front of us, Bob. The series, The Go-Giver, the series of books, The Go-Giver, and there are 4. There's The Go-Giver. The second was Go-Giver Sell More, then the Go-Giver Leader, and now currently, as your intro says, the Go-Giver Influencer. The common thread, as I see it through all of those books, is value and providing value. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark, and I love the name of your organization. I mean, to me, it really says it all. What is value when you think about it? It's, and it's so important because you mentioned about value being at first in terms of price and so forth. And then you took it to that, very next level. And so often people, I think, do confuse the terms price and value. And it's so important to know the difference because price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It simply is what it is. It's a dollar figure. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something to that end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, connection, relationship? What is it about it that brings so much worth or value to another human being that they will want to? Now, again, it depends upon the situation. Exchange their money for it and be glad they did. Be in a relationship with that person and be glad they did. Share intellectual information and be glad they did, So it's really what you're doing is covering so much and covering every part of life that that's important to people.
Yeah, and I love how you define that a finite versus a more intangible relative worth.
Yeah, and so that's really what the Go-Giver is all about. Because when you think about it, the basic premise, as we say, is shifting your focus, right? And this is so important. Shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others. Understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, but the most financially profitable way as well. And not for some, kind of way out there type of, magical, mystical reasons. Very actually concrete and logical. When you're that person, Bill, which I know you are, who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on making another person's life better, more fulfilling, happier, or whatever it happens to be through what who you are and what you do, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They find value in that, and they want to be a part of your life. And it might be doing business with you directly. It might not be. It might be they refer you to others, or it just might be that the two of you are just good friends or provide great information, whatever it happens to be. But, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. And that's such a key to understand. It's not what we might think is of value. That's important, but not when it comes to the other person, right? It's what they find to be of value, and that's where we've got to place our focus.
Yeah, and that, Bob, is one of the beauties of the whole Go-Giver family of books, as I call them. The understanding that value is in the eyes of the receiver of that value, and that brings back to my premise on branding, where to me branding is twofold. There's the intangible part of a brand, which is what we're talking about, the value, what we provide, what people get from us, and what people want to get from us, and we have to understand that that is in the eye of the person that we're trying to deliver that value to.
Well, that's what you taught me a number of years ago, and that was such a big lesson for me when it came to branding. Right? It's how they understand you and the value you provide, and that's such a key. You're so right on.
Yeah, thank you. And the other leg of branding in my view is brand messaging, which that's where logos and slogans and everything that's tangible that starts to try to communicate what we hope our audience is interested in hearing. Right. So it's understanding our value and then delivering our value in a way that is relevant, meaningful, and sought after.
Yeah, right.
So with that, through the years, I've come to see myself as a brand architect, where I just help make good brands better. And no matter where our brand is, our value and our brand messaging is combined, it can always get better. So as you're aware, I've created what I call branding pillars, and there's 5. There's leadership, there's behavior, communication, influence, and team. And those are delivered linear, but as you are very well aware, they all kind of intermingle. But each of those areas is an area that, in my experience, can be looked at almost in a silo to see how they interact with the other elements, all of which can strengthen a brand. So if you are willing, let's take a look at each of those and take a look at it from the perspective of the Go-Giver and your total experience. So let's talk first a little bit about leadership. And perhaps it comes from the book, The Go-Giver Leader, which I recommend everyone read. But just share your thoughts on the importance of leadership.
Well, I think, and I'm not the first one who said this. This is an old saying. It may have been John Maxwell who said it, but it may have been someone even before Dr. Maxwell. I don't know. But there's a saying, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I love that saying, in the context in which it's meant, because we know, Bill, that anyone from any, let's say, position in a company or an organization, anyone can lead from anywhere. Okay, that's an individual choice. But a culture begins at the top, yes, and works its way down, right? We know that because, yes, if the leader does not accept a certain philosophy, if you will, as being of high value, and they don't buy into it themselves, it's not going to go throughout the organization.
Yeah, and that's so well said, because it does have to start at the top, and it needs to be reinforced from the top and then throughout the entire lineage. So what every leader needs is the first follower. So if they can't convince one person, they won't convince everyone. But go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples of that, because I'm just thinking of the work you're doing, and I believe you've done some work with Bob Chapman at Barry Waymiller, who is one of my favorite all-time heroes and leaders. And he created a culture, and it's an interesting thing because in his book, Everybody Matters, he tells the story about how he really went from being a typical leader at that time, where it was taught to be numbers focused. Not that those aren't important, but that can't be the focus, right? Numbers focused. It was all profit and loss. The people were secondary and so forth. And they did well, but they also slid, and they did well again, and they slid. And then one day he's at the wedding of a great friend of his daughter who's getting married. And he's listening to the father of the bride, his friend, make a toast welcoming the new groom, the daughter's husband, into the family. And I'm not saying, I'm paraphrasing it horribly, so please forgive me. But the father said something like, and he said the person by the first name, and he said, we welcome you into his family, into our family. I just want you to know that her mother and I have raised her with love and encouragement. And, he went on a couple more words, and then he said, in other words, you're marrying our precious daughter. Okay. And at that point, Bob Chapman had an epiphany, and that was this. At Barry Waymiller, we have tens of thousands of employees, and every single one of those employees is somebody's precious son or daughter. And it's our responsibility to act accordingly and to nurture and love. And you know what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
From that point on, everything changed. And wow, they have been an immensely profitable company. Why not? The people who work there feel as though they're part of a family. They're valued, they're loved, they're encouraged, they're taught, they're given autonomy, they're given a chance for mastery, they have relationship. I mean, it's just a wonderful, I just love that book.
Yeah, and he's a fascinating man, and that's a terrific example of a company that, quote unquote, gets it. And it really highlights, Bob, our relational value organization premise of the base level is financial value. And yes, they're a manufacturing conglomerate globally, and they manufacture things that help manufacture other things that we use. So they manufacture, like the little clippy on an envelope, that the butterfly, they manufacture that. So it's nothing glamorous or sexy, but the financial value was there. And then their intellectual value kicked in, and they learned how to do it better, and they learned manufacturing efficiencies. But then the light went off with Bob on relational value. And that's when he started to value his people. And he has done a great job of not just creating that, but personally driving that down, not through his company, but also horizontally to other business and to government and to anyone and everyone that'll listen. That's a fantastic example of leadership. What would you say is your primary takeaway from the Go-Giver leader, if there were one thing, and that's a hard thing to say because you and John developed such beautiful, content-rich stories, but what would you say would maybe be the biggest takeaway from that book?
Bill, I think it would be that when it comes right down to it, great leadership is never about the leader. Great leadership is about those people you lead, really those people you serve. Right? Those people to whom you give leadership. We talk about giving leadership as being both a noun and a verb, right? Giving leadership is a type of leadership where you give value to those you lead. That's your focus. But it's also a verb. It's giving them the opportunity to shine. It's making them the star. And I always think of that as a difference. In Jim Collins's classic book, Good to Great, he talked about the difference between level 4 leaders and level 5 leaders. And both level 4 and level 5 leaders were just as talented. Okay, they had the talent, they had the skill set, but with level 4 leaders, it was basically about them. They took the credit, they got the press, you know what I'm saying? Level 5 leaders were different. Level 5 leaders gave the credit away. It was truly giving leadership. They gave the credit. They gave the spotlight to those that they were leading and developing. They would take the blame, even if it wasn't there, when something happened. So that's really the difference. And I think that really is the point in the Go-Giver leader. And, John, and you're great friends with John David Mann, and I know he has so much respect for you. John, he's truly the lead writer and the storyteller, of the team. And I just thought that the way he wrote some of those scenes, just brought that out in a way that few others could have. He took a concept that is a good concept, but boy, did he just I think really especially that last talk when Ben was really saying, what do I have to offer? Well, I offer you. You're what this is about, not me.
Yeah. And that is fantastic. And just a quick shout out to John David Mann. He is a brilliant writer. And has such a Renaissance man. We could talk about John for hours. So I can just encourage people to learn about John in any way you can, but know that he is a brilliant author. And together, the team of Bob Burg and John David Mann take really powerful concepts and bring them to life in a way that's really relevant. And we appreciate that. So
thank you.
The second pillar that I talk about is behavior. And to me, a person's behavior, and let me say this, behavior is very easy to know because behavior is tangible. Behavior can be seen, it can be heard, and or it can be felt, period. Anything over and above that, we cross the line into judgment.
Right.
Which is why we have to be so aware of our behavior, I believe, as an individual, but also as a company entity. So talk to me, please, Bob, about the importance of behavior.
Well, I think that behavior is the result of who you are, right? When Aunt Elle in the Go-Giver Leader was talking about character, and she said it... came from an old Greek word meaning scrape or scratch. Eventually, it came to mean an engraved marking, right? It's something that's part of you. And I would say that character is, the sum total of all one's qualities. So it's their defining quality, right? That is your character. And in that a person's character manifests itself in their behaviors. So, so let's say you've got a great leader. We tend to know with great leaders, we tend to know what they stand for. and they tend to really stand for something. Now, that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. They're human beings. Of course they do. It doesn't mean they don't course correct. Absolutely they do. It also doesn't mean they're not flexible when it comes to strategy. Sure they are. But when it comes to those, again, values-based decisions, they are immovable, immutable, and unchangeable. And that's why we trust them. That's why
I love
we
that.
trust them.
I love that. That's powerful. And the other thing about behavior is when we understand what our behavioral tendencies are, we know ourselves better. And should we, and I suggest that we all should, take the time to understand behavioral tendencies and how to identify them in others, that allows us to be more other-focused, and we're delivering more value in that regard because we're communicating and behaving in a way that allows the other person to stay more in their comfort zone. So when I say alter our behavior, I don't mean a significant change or to be inauthentic, but we can adjust. We can adjust how we behave and how we talk, and that's important when we're communicating to prospective customers and the general public.
Absolutely.
And speaking of communicating, that's the third pillar. Communication is at the heart of, I feel, the Go-Giver, and it's certainly, without a doubt, at the heart of Bob Burg's character. You are a brilliant communicator, a Hall of Fame speaker. So professionally, you deliver a terrific message, but one-to-one like we are now, on social media, you are just, without question, the only person that I've personally run across that addresses every comment sent to them and is always communicating in such a way that if people either don't understand or even challenge what you put out there, you're very willing to have that communication and to help bring insight. And here's a key thing about you, Bob, and from as I see it, and to me, it's key in communication in general. You don't communicate with people that might challenge you or not fully understand your premise, trying to force them to agree with you. You communicate in a way that says, here's the information, do you understand it? You don't have to agree, but can you accept the premise? And that is key to communication.
Thank you. Thank you. I think really communication, when it's effective, is being able to deliver your intent in a way that's successful in terms of they're able to understand it.
Yes.
And be able to receive someone's intent in a way that you understand it. But a lot of times, Bill, as you know, we don't know that we don't understand, and we don't know that they don't understand because we all come from the world with different belief systems, different ways of looking at the world. And what is a belief? It's a subjective truth.
Right.
Right. It's the truth as we understand the truth to be, not necessarily what the truth is. And go ahead.
No, finish, please.
And since we see the world from different ways, we've got to know that often when we say something, we know what we mean by that, but they don't. So it's incumbent upon us to ask questions in a kind, tactful, respectful way so that we can clarify. And it's the same when we hear something. Instead of just assuming we know, let's understand we don't know necessarily what they mean. And so we need to, again, take the responsibility. It's the responsibility of the communicator to ensure that both they and the other person are understood.
Yes. And boy, I cannot think off the top of my head who I should attribute this quote to, but it's a brilliant quote, and it says the thing about communication is the
communication is believing that it's taken place.
Is the belief that it's actually occurred.
Yeah, and it's actually it's credited to somebody, but he's not the one who said it. It's one of those like how things are attributed to Mark Twain or Benjamin Franklin or somebody where it sounds very much like them. But I know that the quote you're talking about. Yeah,
And the point of it is sorry to make you struggle to look it up.
Now you've got me thinking now. I think John and I actually put this in the back of the Go-Giver influencer. You go ahead, and I don't mean to multitask, and I apologize, but I'm just going to see if I can find.
And I appreciate you doing that. I shouldn't bring things up that I don't have a solid reference to.
No, that's okay, because I know exactly what you're thinking of. By the way, George Bernard Shaw is the person it's often attributed to. But someone else actually said it, and I apologize. I'm not finding it in here. I opened up a Pandora's box by mistake. Well, of course, you're mentioned in this book. You know that in the acknowledgements, because you were so helpful to us, and your feedback and so forth, which we greatly appreciate.
It's very humbling and quite the honor. So the thing about communication is, so often we think that it's taken place, and it hasn't, because what you just said, we understand what we're communicating, but we have no clue and don't take the time to truly see if the person we're communicating to understands.
Exactly.
And that's partly why I put behavior before communication, because if we know our behavior tendency, the more we can understand someone else's, the more we're able to understand how better to communicate to them.
Sure.
So as you know, I tend to go on and on, but a lot of people want information more in verbal bullet points.
Sure.
And when I recognize that type of person, I have to try to adjust my communication so that they'll understand what I'm saying. And that leads us into the third area, and that the fourth area rather, and that is influence. And there's another brilliant book, The Go-Giver Influence, which frankly, it's for you and John, it's probably like having children where you can't say you have a favorite, but I can. Of all your book babies, The Go-Giver Influencer is perhaps my favorite because of the content and the message it delivers. Talk to me, Bob, about how The Go-Giver Influencer came about.
Well, because we really believe that influence is so very important in terms of a successful life. And if we ask the question, so what is influence really? Because again, it always goes back to a premise. It goes back to a definition. And you could very easily define on a very basic level, we can define influence as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. By definition, that's influence. But yeah, it's its definition, but it's not its substance. It's not its essence. The essence of influence is pull. Pull as opposed to push, as in how far can you push a rope? And of course, the answer is not very far, which is why great influencers don't push. You never hear people say, wow, that David or that Mary, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. No, she's influential. She has a lot of pull with people. Pull is an attraction. Great influencers, Bill, attract people first to themselves and only then to their ideas. They do this not through pushing their will, pushing themselves, pushing their ideas, or being push-y. They do it through attraction, through pull. Now, how does this manifest itself? Well, I think the great influencer, what we call the genuine influencer, understands on both a head and heart level what I believe was Dale Carnegie's underlying premise in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is where he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons, right? And so the great influencers ask themselves questions to make sure they're facing in the right direction, which is outward. So how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals? With their wants, with their needs, with their desires? How does what I want this other person to do align with their values? What problems am I helping them to solve? How am I making their life better, bringing them closer to a feeling of happiness? And when asking ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment to our idea as opposed to trying to depend on some type of compliance, which is, again, it's manipulation or intimidation. Or, one of our good friends, because I know you're friends with her as well, Dondi Scumaci, a great leadership speaker and a wonderful human being. I love what she says. She says, when it comes to influence, compliance will never take you where commitment can go.
I've heard that from her. I love that. That's a brilliant quote. Thank you for sharing it, Bob. And Dondi, wherever you are, thank you for saying it. So influence is starting with a premise, and influence, and you just described it so beautifully, is that philosophy that you just expanded on about influence is kind of at the heart of the relational value premise, the relational value initiative. And it's about starting from a point of being other-focused. Right. It doesn't mean, and that's the whole premise of the Go-Giver. The collective Go-Giver is starting from a premise of being other-focused, not to put ourselves aside and not to ignore our own needs and wants, but to understand that connecting with some other person or entity and making sure that we are relevant to them is really important.
Yeah.
And influence also is there's we could stay on influence for a long time, but I know you've had some. I know you've influenced hundreds of thousands because I've heard you talked about literally globally. But I also know that you have some real key influencers in your life, not the least of whom is Zig Ziglar. And another I found out by listening to your course on Your Way to Remembering Names and Faces, and that is indirectly through your father's management of a gym where Angelo Dundee trained. And feel free to get into that story if you'd like, but I just throw that out there because the breadth of influence that has helped make Bob Burg, really underscores the importance of influence and how we influence others has a ripple effect. Now, I could probably guarantee you that Angelo Dundee at no point thought, well, if I say this and bring this philosophy forward to Mike Burg, that his son Bob in 30, 40 years is going to be able to talk about this and make a point from it. But that's influence. That's the power of influence.
What a great point. Yeah, because, Angelo Dundee was, of course, the trainer of Muhammad Ali. And then Sugar Ray Leonard, and of course many others. But he and his brother Chris, starting back in the I think early 50s, late 40s, had the famous Fifth Street Fight Gym in Miami Beach. And after World War II, Dad, who had was in Miami Beach, started. He went to the gym just to work out. He was actually improving a bad shoulder that he'd hurt in the war, and he ended up running the gym as manager of the gym, working the corners with Angelo, and it was a great experience. And Angelo used to tell Dad that the way he would bring a fighter along was to help that fighter build on his small successes. So when that fighter was just starting out and his level of ability was here, he'd make sure to fix him up with a fighter who on his best day, if his fighter's worst day he was here, he'd make sure he set him up with a guy who on his best day was here. So his fighter would generally win, get a little more confidence and a little more skill. So now on his worst day he's here, Angelo would set him up to fight with a guy who on his best day was here. So his guy would genuinely win, get more confidence. Now he'd be up to here. And what I interpret that as is, we always hear about that we should be operating outside our comfort zone. And there's certainly a time and place for that, of course. But what I'd rather people do is expand their already existing comfort zone, because the chances are we will take more action within our comfort zone than we will without it. Again, time and place for everything, of course. But that's why I love the idea that my dad learned from Mr. Dundee, to build on your small successes. I've always tried to do that, right? The small successes, build on them, get more confidence, get more ability, right? And so yeah, sure.
And oftentimes, I'll just throw this in there too. Oftentimes, most of us overlook acknowledging and appreciating our small successes because we're focused on the big goals and visions.
Yeah.
And Bob, I could talk to you for days. I know we're running tight on time. I appreciate that, but I do want to talk about just the fifth element because I think it might be a future Go-Giver book. And I'll spoiler alert: the title might be the Go-Giver Team. But team is so important in life, in family, in business. And that is, it comes through not directly, but in every single one of the Go-Giver books, the concept of team and how people interact and how people trust each other is essential to the success. So just a few moments to give me your thoughts on team.
I really think that when you have a team that is effective and functional and of course, Patrick Lencioni wrote the great book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and he's, the expert in that. But as I see a team and I see an effective team, it's people, it's a group of individuals that all come together with their high, and again, we go back to value, with their highest value being victory or succeed. That means, yes, you will put the success of the team over your individual success. But that doesn't mean you're diminishing your own value or diminishing your own sense of self-esteem or putting yourself, no, not at all. It's that because you hold a high value of the good of the team, it's within you, it's congruent with your values to place your self-interest aside for the good of the team. Now, here's the thing. When you have an entire team, when that's the culture of the team, they're unstoppable. That's why we know that teams who have a couple of superstars but don't have that culture, right? They can get to a certain point, of course, through the talent of those stars, but very rarely are they championship teams. And even when they are, it's rarely sustainable. And I'd go on to say there are very few teams that have ever won a title by being, just with the stars. It's typically, I remember that no-name defense of the Miami Dolphins that had that undefeated season. I think it was 72 or 73, and I apologize, I don't remember. A bunch of no-names on offense too and defense, but they all just played for each other. The 69 New York Knicks were that kind of team. And there were so many, I start mentioning that you could mention a whole bunch of them and make a lot of sports, but that's how we think about it. But you also see it in business. You see it in sales teams. When the sales department, the marketing department, and the people who answer the phone, and when they're all together, right? What happens? It's absolutely powerful.
Yeah. And what you're talking about there, Bob, is everyone recognizing and agreeing on the end goal, but at the same time understanding their role in that quest.
Sure.
So two things. First of all, Patrick Lencioni, and I am an authorized partner for Patrick's five functions of a cohesive team.
Right. Yes.
Which is built on his book, The Five Dysfunctions. But basically, what he says is there's nothing more powerful than having a team all rowing in the same direction.
I love that.
And everyone knowing their position. I'll say this real quickly. There's a story that John Kennedy, back in the day when he had challenged our country to be first to the moon, had gone to what then was still Cape Canaveral to tour. And the story goes that he ran into someone with a broom who was there as a custodian. And he went over and introduced himself. And he said, I'm John Kennedy, how are you? And he goes, fine. He goes, well, what do you do here? And he said, I help get the U.S. to the moon. And the point of that story is he knows if everything's not clean and if everything's, he knows his role. Now, it turns out that story is bunk, but never let the facts get in the way of the story.
Apocryphal, right?
So, maybe
it's one of those beautiful story that never actually happened, but
Well, it's like when Abraham Lincoln said, "Be careful what you click on the internet."
Exactly. Yes, and if you can't trust Lincoln on the internet, who can you trust?
Yeah, exactly. Bob, I could speak to you forever. I so much cherish you and the time you've given us. Let me ask you this. You have so much to offer. I encourage everyone watching this to, if you've not read The Go-Giver, do so. If you've not read all 4 of the books in The Go-Giver, do so. If you've not read Bob's book, Endless Referrals, do so. There's just a wealth of information here, and you can find out all this information at burg.com. That's BURG.com. But in particular, are there some things that you feel you would direct people to now, more so than perhaps others?
Well, my brilliant business partner, Kathy Tajanel, she
amazing.
and I have produced a video, a 4-part online video mini course called Selling the Go-Giver Way. And it's free of charge. So when you go to the site, you can just look for it, and there might even be a little pop-up that comes up if it works correctly. And you can click on that. So, Selling the Go-Giver Way.
Okay, that sounds great. And for those of you that go to burg.com, again, the amount of material and education and resources there is endless, much like the referral system. So, Bob, thank you so much for being you. Thank you for giving of your time and your knowledge. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Honored. Thank you.